Hey guys, welcome back to the third episode of Login Flow in Swift VIPER iOS. So this is, if you're not aware of what is happening, it's part of a series called Creation of a Grocery Application, which has the shopping carts and all that stuff. But then we are trying to integrate a login screen now for this feature. So that's a whole background, and code is available in my patron site. You can check out the link section in the description to access that code base. If not, let's get started with this third episode right now. So wherever right now we are is we have already created a transition screen where you'll get these two screens, the sign up and the login screens. So it's if you're not seen that episode, go back to the first and the second episodes and have a look at it. So whatever we are going to do in this episode is start integrating the HTTP calls as well as saving the session IDs and everything which is related to the user. So that's what we'll be doing in this episode. So let's get things going on. So let's see what I have right now. So I have something in the sign up screen where I can enter the details. Then once I hit the sign up, it does not do anything because I don't have that implementation yet. The similar is the case with login. So ideally what should happen is as soon as I sign up, it should take me back to my login screen where I can start entering the details of whatever I have signed up with. Let's say if it is, in my case, a wish@gmail.com or something. I start logging in, it should take me to that first dashboard screen wherever the groceries are listed. So the idea behind this app to create a grocery app where a user can log in and start adding his items to a shopping cart, which can be accessed. Let's say if he's logging into another device, he'll be able to access the same kind of cart item in his secondary device, or maybe in a second or third devices that he's having. So that's the idea here. So let's begin with creating the required things. At least whatever we have right now for the login and the sign up screens are let's see what we have. We have the view controller for, let's say, a login. We have a presenter. We have a router. So we don't have the interactor section as yet because we did not define the use cases required. Let's say in this case it is signing up the user or logging in a user. So let's create that. First thing first, let's go to the interactor section. So one of the things I'll be doing in this tutorial series is that I already have a completed application which is already there in patron site. So whatever I'll be doing it to make it faster, I'll just be grabbing some of the code base which is there, existing ones, and I'll just be grabbing some of the logic which is already there and then grabbing it here and then working on it. So let's start with that. So whatever I need is the interactor. For this, let me just call that as AuthInteractor because it is applicable for authorization. Let's say if it is even in login or a sign up or a refresh token, any of these use cases we can capture actually in this AuthInteractor. So that's what we are doing here. Let's create that interactor section right now. That's my interactor. So let me also create an init because Interactor as such cannot work without a DB and a service layer, which is like an HTTP layer, which we'll be creating in a bit right now. So let's start with creating the functions which we need. Let's say what are the functions which we need to be added in an interactor. So let me just go to my existing implementation and see what are the things I have. So I have a sign up and a login function, first thing first. So let me also create an extension. I'm just keeping everything consistent with whatever I have already created as a project, so that whatever I have already done is consistent with whatever I am doing right now. So function, create a function called sign up and also a function called login. These are the two use cases which we are going to handle now, a login function and a sign up function. So what all things I need to, let's say, sign up a user. So if you look at this view, I am passing the name, email and password as the parameters. So let me also just add that email. Maybe I just add the username as the first thing, email and the password. These are the three things which I need, and these are the things which I will require. And then this will be an asynchronous process. Let's say if I send a request to the server, it is going to respond back at a later point. So for that later point, we need to define a closure on completion, what should happen. So let me define something called as an auth result. And let me just grab whatever I have. Okay, maybe I'll just create it in the auth in the interactor itself. Let me create an enum called auth result, which will accept a generic type. So depending on the scenarios, it can return a string, return a boolean, or a string value, or even an object. So that's the reason I'm just keeping it as an enum generic type, so that the result that I will get will be generic. So based on the scenario, we can just use this auth result. Failure can always be, let's say, an error message, which will always be of type string. So I'm just keeping it as is. So it's not a generic type. So this is what I am expecting as an auth result, which this completion block is going to return to me. Escaping auth result. At least in this case, maybe once sign up is completed, I'm not expecting nothing more than a sign up response with a string value, like sign up is successful or something. So once we start logging in, that is when we will understand what is the what is a token or something which will be returned. So that is a separate thing. Right now, let's just start with this auth result of string. That's my completion block. So that sign up function is, let's just start wiring these things. Like I already have the sign up function, which is accepting these parameters, and it is going to return me an auth result type. So let's start bringing in our services which is required, let's say in this case. So this is my sign up first function I'm writing. So let me just go to, so what does the interactor require now? Interactor now requires the API services to be injected, so that it can start calling it from this and get some response. So let's create that now. So I have this HTTP services section where I already have a groceries service created, which is conforming to the groceries API. So similarly, even I have something called as an images API, which is just more like an image utility, which will fetch me the images which I already have in my server and return me. So that's the thing here. So similarly, let me just create something called as an auth service. So this should conform to a protocol now, similar to however we have defined groceries API. Let me just create something called as an auth API. Protocol. So auth service should implement this auth API. So let's also create an extension similar to earlier cases. That's it. Excuse me. So this is my auth service. So what should it accept? We already have the grocery service, which was accepting an HTTP service and it was using that as HTTP service. So let's just create the same thing. Why we have a separate HTTP service and a different service altogether here is because we can create something like a stub server which will not actually be having the real server implementation, and this stub server will be implementing all these protocols which we have created, so that it becomes easier to test our servers without having a real database, a real service available. So that's the reason we have a separate service created which is conforming to this API. So let's just by the way, I have moved into the new Xcode 11.2.1. It is slightly buggy, and it interface behaves a little different from whatever I was using 10.1 earlier. So let's just start with passing. What do we have here? Like the grocery service is accepting grocery HTTP service. So let's just create that similar thing. HTTP service is having nothing but something like this. So let's also create something for our auth HTTP service. Where do I have my services? Here. Okay. Mostly I'm just gonna grab whatever I have here. It's just segregating things as is. Like this is very specific to auth HTTP. The other ones are for groceries and every other things. So it's conforming to HTTP service, similar thing, nothing different. And we also need something called as there are two things which we use: the HTTP router and an HTTP service. So HTTP service will be injected to our router so that it can make calls. So that's what we will do. So we'll also create auth HTTP router. This is where we will define our API endpoints which we need to call. So this will be an enum auth HTTP router. So what should it conform to? Let me have a look. So let's add cases later, but let me create an extension of auth HTTP router which will conform to HTTP router which we have already defined. So it's nothing but basic structure of how basic structure to actually create a request. So these are the things which we will use to create a request. That's what it is conforming to. So once we implement these things, we can pass the corresponding parameters required. So in my case, firstly I need a login and a sign up. So for logging and sign up, this will be post request. So I'll have to pass a model object which will be translated to a JSON object. So that's what we will do next. We have these two functions right now. Let's implement that, whatever is needed. So these are the implementations required. So everything, like say, start with base URL is something which I already have. So let me just grab whatever I have. This is my base URL which I have deployed in my server. This is the path to that server, and then I need to have the path switch pattern. Let me just add it automatically. Fix. Okay, so login and code. So whatever path I have is for login. Let me return. This is what I have given as the endpoint. I can just show you in Postman. So I have, where do I have a login? Okay, so this is my login, which is accepting content type and the body. So email and password are the two things. So that's the same path which I'm setting here, so that I can make that request to the server. Next is my HTTP methods. In this case, at least, let me just make it switch case, because I might just add some things which might be not just post but get method as well. So let me do that. So for at least in this login and sign up case, it's both going to be post requests. So I can just gladly return post as the request type. So that's done. Okay, I need to import Alamofire so that I don't get these errors. That's done. Now let me handle the headers. So headers, as it is a content application JSON. So let me just grab those things so that it's easier. Don't need any defaults yet. I'll have login and sign up, both having this content type. Let me just grab and keep it. So that's my content type. And parameters which I'll be passing is nothing, because it's a post request. And I also need the function body. Data, okay, so in this case it's going to be two different kinds of requests. So for login, I'm going to get that user object, and sign up. Again, it's going to be user, but the way it will be formatted, maybe I can just combine it. It does not make much difference because encoding is going to be the same. So I can just say return try. So this is the way you encode your object. JSON encoder to encode. So it's saying this user is not yet conforming to this type. So I don't have anything yet added here. So I need to now create a model because I'm not passed anything here. So I'm just trying to add a parameter which is not there yet. So I need to add that. So let me create a model now for this auth user. So it's nothing but whatever you populate here, and once you, let's say, a sign up, it goes to the presenter and to the interactor, and then just starts populating a model object which will pass, which will be conforming to codable. So that's the thing we'll be using now. So that is what we'll be passing here. So let me create that. So I already have this model object, just calling it auth model because it's valid for both the cases, whether it is sign up or login. Let me go to the model section and create a model. Auth model, and construct auth model which is conforming to codable, and let me add the parameters. One is the name, then email and password. 3 parameters. So this is valid for both the cases. If it is just username, if it is just logging in, then I'll just be passing these two and leaving out this one. So that's what I'll be doing. So similar, for that sake, I'll be creating an init. So if I'm let's say using only this model for login, then I don't need to pass anything through name. I'm just keeping it as empty, and the rest of the things are anyway common for logging or sign up. I'm just passing that as well. So that's my model which I'll be using now. It's already conforming to codable, so I can just pass it here. So now we'll not get that error. That error is gone now. Wait, I get this. It's a warning I'm getting for future. Let me just ignore that for the time being. Let me identify if it is something very specific to the new. But we are not in any kind of trouble right now because we can use it right now, and it's able to decode these two, encode these two, so that it becomes the JSON object which we can pass for the request. So our router is ready. Even our service is ready for auth. Both these things are ready. So whatever we just need to do right now is go back to our auth service and then include we don't have any functions yet here. So let me add that auth service. Let me go back. What do I have? Auth service, auth API. Just need let me just add a use a function. Let me just grab it. It's easier now because it's nothing major. Auth service should I'm having a sign up function and a login function. Sign up has a username, email, password as a parameters, and on success I'm just returning it because on success itself my service returns me a token, a type of the token, and expires in these parameters. But majorly I won't be using it for anything because I'll be only validating the user after logging in. So maybe this I'll just ignore whatever I get through this sign up response, and I'll be mostly concentrating. Maybe if I get a failure, that's what I will use. Let's say on sign up, if the user is already existing, then it might send me a response saying, oh, this user is existing, so try with something else. So those are the things which I might just capture and send back to the UI. But success, maybe on the sign up case, I might just ignore it. Maybe I'll just say if it is 200, okay, yeah, perfect. Let's go ahead with the login section. So similarly, I have the login function where email, password. This success returns me a token which I'm interested in, and I'll save that in my database so that I can use it to, let's say, refresh the token or even make request. So, maybe let's say if I have to add a shopping cart item, then I'll have to send this token along with the bearer. So that's what I'll be using this for. An error as well, similarly, like if you're logging in and if you get invalid login or something, then we can capture that. So those are the two functions I'm adding right now. So my auth service will request me to implement those two similar things: username, email, and password. On success failure, what should happen? I have these two. A similar thing for sign up, email, password. I am just getting all these things here. I'll start creating that model object from here using that. So that's the idea here. Okay, that's perfect. Now sign up, login, auth services are ready. So auth service needs now that this HTTP router and whatever we created, the HTTP service, to be added here. So let me just easily add those here, like simple lazy private lazy HTTP service or HTTP service, and I can also make this as a singleton so that it's common across auth service. And one other thing which you can do is have an init and maybe pass this as a parameter so that it becomes easily testable as well. What's HTTP service, and then I might just say self dot if I don't have this. Private let this is one way with dependency injection, which will let you create a singleton. Let me make it private. That's my singleton. It's accepting a parameter, but anyway I'm passing it as a default. So if you want to test it, it's easier that you can inject any kind of service if this is the service. So that's my service passed here. Now I can use it. So I have the opportunity to call this router first, auth HTTP router dot. I already have the signup function, which is accepting an auth model. So it's easier now. Auth model. I can just instantiate that this is for sign up. So I can pass these parameters: username, email, and password. 3 things to create this. That's my thing. Sign up. That's, and I can make that request using a HTTP service, which I already have here. So auth HTTP service. Let me just grab that HTTP service. That's my request. So my request is ready. Now if I get my response, I can parse it as a JSON format. That's my result. Maybe I can call it as response. So this will trigger my request. So it throws, so let's call it, keep it within the do try to catch block, and let's move this inside the try block. Yeah, pattern, I'm not expecting any other error. So that's my request for sign up, which will, once this auth service, which I'll be now, this auth API I'll be passing to the Interactor, which can make this request. So that's what is going to happen right now. And let me handle errors. If it's failing, let me just print like sign up failed with error equals, maybe that's just for printing the error side, but user might not need this error, so I'm just keeping it as localized description. Okay, and I already have a failure case here, so I can just pass that message back, like error dot localized description, maybe, or maybe a user friendly error, because I already captured it here. And if I have a good logger available with me, this is, printing is not great when you're actually in your real application. It's easier if you can have a good logger in place where you can log your things within a cloud or in a file or anywhere, so that it's easier to track your whatever exceptions which are happening. So in this case, I'm just keeping a print right now. I can show you having a logger added at a later point, but then let's keep the print right now. So my failure is captured here. As soon as it hits a failure, I'll just send it back to the interactor. So what about the success cases? So at least however I have defined in my services, if I get a to 200 or 201, 200 in this case, maybe it's 200 in my case. If it is 200, my sign up request is successful. At that point, I'll parse that response and then send it back to my client saying, okay, we are good. So let me just do that part right now. So my guard, I might just guard it, saying guard response dot result. Okay, response dot status code is what I'll get is 200. I'm good to go. Else I can just do something like error handling within this. Else I'll come here. So error handling most probably will be coming with something called as a message and an error. So that's what I'll use. So I can even use that with an error handler. So decode that one. So before that, let me handle the success case. In success case, I'm going to get three things: access token, token type, and expires on. So I can just handle that right away. So let me just, if this is fine, then I can just grab the date. It'll come as a dictionary. So I'm just grabbing it as is response dot result. Okay, so result dot values through which I'll get the result from Alamofire. So this will be my dictionary, which will contain that value set. Let me just make it as a dictionary of string any. So this is what my response format will be, and let me just see whether I get it. I will get an access token. I can just say dictionary with this key. So this is something coming from server. You don't need to actually understand what is going on here. It's like I'm returning the access token, token type, and expires in three things through a dictionary. So it's, if once I parse it, I get it as a string. So three things I'm expecting, I'm just parsing three of them. Also, let me do that else part. Else I might return just like that, return. Maybe print token, sign up token, parsing failed. So otherwise I will get why is it giving an error? Dictionary. Okay, I should do unwrapping. Fine, then I have something called as token type coming back, dictionary, and then token type as string, and finally I have something called as expires in. Three things are coming. I'm not using it at all, but then I'll just return it so that if let's say if you want those things to automatically log in a user or something after he signs up, then this things can be stored. But in my case, at least I'm going to actually transition to the login screen as soon as sign up is completed. So extra set of safety while logging in so that the user logs in a second time and validates himself. So that's what I will be doing here. So these are the things I'm trying to find. As soon as the sign up is successful, I try to get the access token, token type, and expires in three things, and then return it. So this is the success case. So I'll do something like success. What do I return? So I already have defined it. Success string int. So those three things are string and int access token type and expires in. So 3 things successfully I'll be returning. Expires in. Okay, it is an int type. So that's what I have defined on the server side. So that's what server uses JWT token authentication. So I'm just directly using whatever I have there. So success, returning this. Now I need to handle the failure within this, because if it is 401 or something else, then I can directly parse that response and send it back to the client saying show this error message. So let's do that. If my status code is something else other than 200, then I can directly get that data. If let data is equal to response dot data, that's where the error is going to come back. If I get that, then I can simply do 2 things. Either I can get that as a dictionary and do the same thing whatever I did here, or I can even create an auth error codable type, so that I can just validation error if there are any, and I can just decode it and then send it as a model to the client side. Let's even try that now. So I have something called as, for at least for the sign up, I have something called as a sign up error. Let me use that. So let me create that now in the model section. So I'm expecting the server to return this error in a specific format. Or maybe I can just show you that. Let's say this is going to give me an error because not this. Let me just see the sign up side, because if its user is already existing or something, it's going to throw up an error on me. Should be, where did I sign up earlier? I don't see any sign up. Okay, let me just use a post, change it to register. It should give me an error right away because I'm not passing one of the required fields. Send it. Okay, see, the validation errors comes back as an array of things. So if it's asking me to add name as well, so let me also add the name, testing, and then it will just give me one error that this email is already existing. So it gives me an array of errors.